Welcome to Sisters in Arms. I'm Carrie Ann Auclair.
And I'm Renee Gagne. Together we serve as a Second Amendment resource for our communities.
And today we have a very special guest, Mike Harris from GOAL, Gun Owners Action League. You are the Director of Public Policy, so welcome aboard. Appreciate you being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
If you can tell us a little bit about what you do for GOAL and...
So I am one of the registered lobbyists for the organization. I work with Jim pretty directly, but my job is basically to watch the legislature, watch the courts, make sure
that's a tough job in Mass.
Yeah, I mean it's it's not easy.
No.
Watch the legislature, watch the courts on the state level, and just kind of track legislation, break it down, analyze it, make it digestible to our members.
So we can understand what we're reading?
Yeah, as much as we can.
Yeah.
You do a great job.
Sometimes it's more easier said than done. But,
gosh. I know I've worked with you on a few of these. I'm like, I don't know what I just read. It's like another language.
Well, because some of the bills are 100 pages long or so.
Yeah, especially the really, really big ones that have a ton of stuff in them. Like the current omnibus bill that is in conference committee right
Right. So,
we're
did you want to introduce what?
Yeah, so Mike,
thing
this
that
is very exciting.
Yeah.
We're doing this little segment on a lot of our episodes, and it's called Scope Line Reports. And so what it's doing is it's targeting in, it's scoping in, dial in on a specific topic that's hot right now.
Yep.
Okay.
We're hoping to do like national reports because, you know, we're here in Massachusetts, but we have viewers that are otherwise in different states.
Sure.
So Scope Line Report, here we go. So,
Awesome.
bump stocks. We're going to talk about that for our Scope Line
So
Report.
talking about US v. Cargill.
Yes.
The case came out last week. So, this goes back to a Trump-era ban on bump stocks following the Nevada shooting, the deadliest mass shooting in the history of the country. It's scary. Nobody likes it when that happens.
Nope.
It's not good for anybody, obviously. And President Trump directed the ATF to figure out a way to make bump stocks illegal, and they promulgated a regulation, which is just kind of a reinterpretation of the law, and classified bump stocks and weapons that have bump stocks attached to them as machine guns, which are illegal for transfer under the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act of 1986. Cargill was a bump stock owner. I think he had 3 of them. He turned them in because there was no.
He was just a layman, just a guy.
Just a guy, and there was no grandfather clause or anything for these. It was just a confiscation order, basically.
You're not getting paid for them.
Yep, not getting paid for them. You're not, and you can't have them.
Just turn your stuff in for free that you paid good money for.
Yep. So he turned in 3 of them, which gave him standing to challenge the law on a constitutional basis, and he did. And this has been kind of going through, all the levels of federal court where it could get to, and now.
So how many years did that take?
I think when was the ban put in place? Was it 2018? I think.
So my point is, it takes a long time.
Oh, it takes forever.
Like people think they're just gonna, we'll just appeal it. It takes a while.
It takes a while.
Right.
It takes a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of money.
Yeah, and then when it gets there, it's not always guaranteed to be heard.
No, it's never guaranteed to be heard. You have to file a writ of. Everybody, there's a whole debate of how you pronounce this word, writ of certiorari. That's how I say it, but a cert, and that's a petition to the Supreme Court to hear a case that has been heard by either a circuit court of appeals or a federal district court of some kind. And the Supreme Court can decide to either grant cert or deny cert, and in this case they took it up.
Yep.
Because
and you can spend all this money, and that's the scary part, all this money.
It happened to GOAL and the NRA back in 2016 when we challenged then Attorney General Maura Healey's reinterpretation of the assault weapons ban.
So what happened with this?
So the court granted cert, and this isn't really a Second Amendment case per se. It's more of a rein-in of federal agency, or reining in of federal agencies kind of couched in the Second Amendment, where the Supreme Court has kind of been on a tear lately where they're kind of working, it seems like they're kind of working to define the lines where separation of powers begin and end among the three co-equal branches of government. You know, you get the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. So this was kind of a rebuke of the ATF's ability to just declare something illegal.
Right, when they don't have any jurisdiction.
When they, they may or may not have any jurisdiction.
Right.
It kind of remains to be seen on the leeway that they can get to do similar things in the future. We can talk about pistol braces and things like that. But, there's arguments to be made about whether or not, shouldering them is the proper use for them. If you're really working on circumventing the NFA, the ban on, or the tax stamp requirement for owning a short-barreled rifle or a short-barreled shotgun. So it kind of just, it's another domino in the war of the co-equal branches of government, I guess.
So was this bill good for us? What happened? I guess I'm not sure.
Yes, so what it did was it said that, Justice Thomas took the straight black letter law, the wording of the National Firearms Act of the NFA, and said this is how Congress defined what a machine gun is. It was the mechanism by which the trigger functions to fire more than one shot by one pull of the trigger. Unless that's how it works, it's not a machine gun as laid out in the black letter of the National Firearms Act. A bump stock, the way it works is, and he even goes through it and he talks about how you can bump fire without one and all that stuff. It's kind of an amusing read. I've always enjoyed the way that Clarence Thomas writes his decisions. They're very plain English, and they're a lot more easy to interpret than Antonin Scalia's opinions used to be, even though he was awesome. So the way a bump stock works is it attaches to the back of your rifle, or your whatever you're attaching it to, and you would hold the trigger, and it would kind of, the inertia from the firearm shooting its last shot would force the gun back inside of it's basically like a sheath like this, and it would force it back and forth, and the trigger being here would just bump against your trigger finger, and it would fire multiple shots in rapid succession, using the recoil of the rifle itself, which under the again the black letter of the NFA is not a machine gun by definition, because it's still, even though it's moving fast and it's kind of moving on its own, it still requires more than one pull of the trigger for it to function as a shot over and over again. That was a bit long-winded, I apologize. But
no, but so that was a good thing, but does it change anything right now, currently in Massachusetts? How does it
not
affect
for Massachusetts, because the way they defined it was, this is, just because we said this interpretation of the NFA is improper and enforced improperly by the ATF at this time, it doesn't mean that Congress can't go ahead and change these things. So, just the mere fact that they cited the NFA in the decision, it kind of legitimizes Congress's ability to, regulate certain types of firearms. So if Congress wants to go back and make a law that bans the ownership of bump stocks and stuff like that, they could, use the other information in this and the other, definitions in this, laid out in this decision, to do that. In Massachusetts at this point, it's illegal for anyone with an LTC to own a bump stock and attach it to, a firearm. So it's a little, Jim was actually going through it the other day, and he always picks out things that are really
Jim's
funny.
the director
Yeah,
of Gun Owners
Jim Wallace, the executive director of Gun Owners Action League. I'm sorry, I just assumed.
We're like,
It's like we're talking among friends. I apologize. I forgot about the camera. So he said, he was looking through it, and it denies ownership of bump stocks to anybody who has an LTC, which in Massachusetts that allows you to purchase, possess, and carry pistols
and long guns.
well, not even just long guns, but specifically large capacity semi-automatic long guns. If you have an FID, which is a firearms identification card, you cannot purchase, possess, or carry a pistol, or even carry a long gun. Technically, you can transport it back and forth to the range or for hunting, things like that. But you also can't purchase or possess a large capacity long gun either. So, technically, there's really nothing you would be able to put a bump stock on that you can own with an FID. But the way the law is written, it doesn't forbid the ownership of bump stocks by those who have an FID. It's kind of weird wording, but just a funky aside.
But don't you feel as though that some of those bills and the way they're written, it's like that, so that gets so confusing with, well, is it this or is it that?
Well, so part of that is just the nature of law making, especially by a full-time legislature, which is what we have in Massachusetts. I think I always say the biggest curse the founding fathers ever left us with was a full-time legislature who has to justify their job every 2 years. And the metric that we use to judge the success of any given legislature, which is the 2-year term that they have, is how many bills they pass or how much legislation gets written. And I think that's crazy, because it just means they just have to keep poking themselves into your lives over and over again, and that's how we judge whether or not they're successful, which I think is very funny. But in this, especially when you're talking about firearms laws in Massachusetts in particular, I always use the analogy that when you look at the whole of Massachusetts firearms law, like in a, if you look at the book.
The big blue book?
Yeah,
The big blue book.
If you look at that, and
That's hundreds of pages long.
Yep.
Usually we pull it out of somewhere.
Yeah.
We usually have it
We
with
should have
us.
had it, right?
We always use that as a prop when we have
Because
it.
it's an amazing
Yeah, exactly.
prop.
Yep.
Because you just throw it, boom.
But when you look at it as a compendium, like as a whole, if you look at it holistically, it's not really cohesive. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of confusion that goes back and forth. We talk about transportation and storage, stuff like that.
Yep.
That's the best example to hold up.
Yep.
Where does transportation end and storage begin? Things
Right.
like that. But if you look at it, and you look at the dates when laws are passed, it's not so much a holistic cure to any type of societal ill that involves firearms. It's more of just a series of overlapping bandages. This year we were worried about bump stocks. Last year we were worried about
Was it arm braces?
pistol braces.
Yeah, pistol
the year
braces.
before that it was we had a shooting in a school, or the year before that we were worried about mental health issues. So they just every year they will pass some type of new legislation, whether it's a specific thing or some new omnibus bill, which they seem to pass every 10 years.
Well, they love
going
to
back and
pass it,
forth.
but then there's no intervention after the bill gets passed, like the law of 2014.
2014 bill?
Like where
Yeah.
are the PSAs that the
Well-
colonel's supposed to produce?
So that's more of a function of, or that's more of a symptom of how the government functions, kind of the interplay of the executive branch and the legislative branch. That particular bill, the example we always use is if you look at it, there are no line items attached to any of the places in the bill where funding is supposed to be assigned.
Right.
And the reasoning behind that, the rationale is the governor gets line item veto. So if there's a line item attached that has compulsory spending attached to it in a bill, the governor can go in and just veto
Really?
specific parts of it.
That's
Yes.
Mike,
crazy.
Carrie and I do PSAs. I say this whole show's a PSA, right? It's education. It doesn't cost us a thing.
No.
Let's be serious. If they really wanted to educate the Commonwealth, they could do it.
Does the government do anything that doesn't cost money?
It burns me to know, because education, we pride ourselves in education.
I mean, there's so many ways to do it where
But that's
people are willing to help.
that's not what it's about.
I know. I know.
painful.
We have to be
Yeah.
careful.
Exactly. But it's a function of the interplay of the two branches of government in the state, where the legislature doesn't trust the governor to not veto these line items that they're attached to it because, they don't want to assign funding to whatever for, whatever reason they give, whether it's
Right.
political or functional or whatever. But on the back end, if it's not specifically assigned funding from an account, which is a line item,
It's not
they
going to happen.
don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
We can make all the laws we want, but if there's no execution from the executive branch, it's not going to get done.
Right. And I know we had a busy couple of days. There was something else that came
Sure
out
did.
too. The decision U.S.
The
versus
Rahimi case. Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So forgive me, I have not had, it came out on Friday, and I had a little bit of a busy weekend, so I have not
dug into it as
dove
deep.
as deep. I haven't done as deep of a dive into this one as I have the Cargill case, but it looks as if the court. So the case was about a gentleman who had a restraining order taken out against him, a protective order, for domestic abuse. That's a terrible thing. We don't like that.
Right.
But the mechanism that courts and the states use to enforce, actually it's a federal law, but the mechanism that the different states use to enforce that law are kind of weird, where oh man, I'm having a hard time explaining it. So they're
Well, that's the way they want it, right?
exactly, well, kind of, yeah. But this case was kind of a challenge to the due process assigned to that type of
Situation.
situation. Yeah. So everybody throws around the term due process, but it's kind of not a subjective term. It's objective in a subjective manner, where if you're charged with a crime, like murder, your due process looks like you get charged by the court, you get an attorney, you go through a case, that kind of stuff. A civil trial, your Sixth Amendment rights don't really attach the same way that they do in a criminal case, because if you can't afford a lawyer, you don't just get one, you have to do it yourself. So, due process for different processes
Right.
it's different, but they've always been kind of defined by the court as things have popped up. In the case of things like red flag laws, like the ERPOs,
Yep.
extreme risk protection orders, harassment orders, restraining orders, things like that, temporary restraining orders, the order and measure by which you are denied your rights, including your Second Amendment rights, your Sixth Amendment, your Fourth, things like that, are different, and they're not fully, in the opinion of the Rahimi lawyers, were not laid out in a way that were easy to follow. So he had a restraining order put against him, and he was. His firearms were confiscated,
Yep.
his license was taken away from him. And they were saying, hey, this was too early for you to do this. This restraining order might not have been valid, but you denied me my rights anyways.
So to catch everyone up, so someone can make a claim that you're threatening them, and the judge
Put a
takes their
restraining
word
order.
on
Restraining
it.
order.
Right, so for a restraining order, it has to be somebody that you have a close relationship with, and it's usually somebody who lives in your house. A harassment order extends out beyond your home. And that's where we're having a conversation right now in Massachusetts about what rights you should be denied once somebody pulls out a harassment order against you. So that's part of the omnibus bill that's moving through right now, and that's a discussion that's going to have to come later on. Should somebody be charged with something like that and have their firearms removed? But Rahimi, the way it came down was they said that if a court orders that you should have your firearms taken away, or you should be denied some other civil right of some kind, after a determination of dangerousness or another such detrimental determination should be made against you, then that's okay. They can't just go into your house and take your stuff initially, but once a court comes in and says, yes, they can do this, they can do it at any point. So having a more bright line definition of what happens in this type of a situation is a good thing. And this could have other implications on, and again, we're talking about Jim Wallace. He thinks that this could have other implications on suitability questions from your local police department moving forward when you're applying for your LTC and things like that, which is kind of good for us. But we always kind of live in like murky gray waters in Massachusetts as far as legality of firearms and things like that are concerned. You know, getting bright line definitions is always a good thing. That's why one of the only things that we're really excited about in the new bill is the fact that it gives us a blood alcohol content number instead of just under the influence.
Under the influence,
So,
yeah. Because if you're under influence, what does that mean?
So, I know I get long-winded on this stuff, but I you know.
No, you are. That's
it's hard to
why
explain.
you do such an amazing job, because you understand the process.
And it's good because
honestly.
you give a lot of information. Like there are a lot of people out there that don't know what an ERPO is, and you just explain that. So you explain a lot in your.
ERPO's a red flag order.
Yep.
is an
Yep.
ERPO. So
And there's a lot of question with that too. I mean, because anybody.
Well, I specifically know people personally that have had ERPOs against them because someone made the claim and it comes out later that the claim wasn't true.
Yeah.
Well, that
and
stinks.
and they actually came to and said, "Oh, I lied."
Right.
You know.
Right. I lied.
And-
That's nice.
And the thing is, like, the big conversation around ERPOs in Massachusetts especially is the list of people who can file them. That's really the big concern.
Yeah.
Extending that list is a little scary.
That
for
is
some
because
people.
weren't they trying to extend it to doctors,
It's-
psychiatrists,
the list is
nurses?
huge.
Like, I couldn't believe
We'd
it.
be here
I'm
all
like,
day.
what?
But the other thing is, police departments your local police department who issues your license to you has always had the
Ability to say
has
no.
always had the ability
Right.
has always had the ability to revoke your license for whatever reason they see fit. If they think you're dangerous, then
Right.
they can do that
They
and
keep
submit
getting
it
calls
to a court.
because of whatever, then obviously there's an issue.
So they've always had the ability to do that, and they would need to then send that to court to the courts in a timely manner and file something so that you can have a
And you
speedy-
have so many days yourself as a gun owner to appeal it and everything else. And
But the problem for those is, a lot of people have Fifth Amendment and Sixth Amendment concerns about that stuff, because your Fifth Amendment is your right to face your accuser, and your right to not incriminate yourself on,
right.
I think that extends to forms, but that's a whole discussion on its
Right.
own. And then your Sixth Amendment, if you're charged with a crime or denial of certain rights, you should be provided with an attorney. There's a lot of concerns. And the Fourth Amendment, which unreasonable searches and seizures, things like that. So
all of these things
so it's
come up.
Exactly, and they all tie back to this concept of due process, which is the manner by which your civil rights can be removed or temporarily removed from you. So if a court says, hey, at this point they can take your guns from you because we determined that this was a concern, or at this point they can put a gag order on you, things like that. So
it's scary because
exactly.
who's to say that one
but
person is fit and one person's not?
But that's why these determinations need to be made by higher courts.
Right.
When you're talking about denial of rights by government,
Right.
That's what a court of appeals is
Right.
for.
Right.
They appeal the decision of the lower court who made the initial determination of what was going to happen. So if they can look back and say, like, hey, this part of the process you guys messed up, we're going to fix it and do it this way, that's kind of the law of the land for that jurisdiction for a little while.
And I know we got about 5 minutes, but I think it's very confusing too, because then you get a lot of people. I mean, I'm fortunate because I work for Goal. I have a question I just ask you and Jim, and I've learned so much in the past year, and in fact for the past 5 years. But for someone like just an average Joe who's not an instructor and doesn't work in this on a regular basis, it's very hard and it's very intimidating. And I think a lot of times they just say, "Oh, the hell with this! I don't understand it." And I think that's why it's so crucial to have organizations like Goal that kind of spits it out so we can understand it, so they can take that information and contact their
That's why
legislator.
being a member of Goal is important.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're
Because
here for.
you can just send an email to you or John Green, who's the Director of Education?
Well, we always say goal is our membership. The staff is more the clearinghouse of information. We're
Yeah.
the ones who kind of,
And there's
we
only
catch
5
it
of
and
us.
feed it out.
And so
Yeah.
whatever memberships we get only helps us with our
Mm-hmm.
mission to protect the civil rights for the little over, 600,000 gun owners we have.
In Massachusetts,
Yep, and we have how many members at Goal
yeah.
now?
About 22,000.
Yeah.
And climbing.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
But you know what, we hear a lot that I didn't know Goal existed.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
They've only been around for 50 years.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
How do you
why,
not
that's why
know?
it's important that we spread awareness like this, like
That's right,
these
right.
shows, and just gun owners in general. And anywhere we can, Facebook, we're trying to get our social media,
Yeah.
we're trying to get our YouTube channel up and running a little bit more. We have a
And
studio
that's-
now, so.
Yeah, and you know, there's the saying, like, ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it.
Right.
Things like that. So, and one of the things that I don't like to use the term law-abiding gun owner. I like to use the term responsible gun owner.
Yes.
Because some laws aren't meant to be followed, but no, you say responsible gun owner, and part of being a responsible gun owner is educating yourself on the law and the jurisdiction where you live.
Yeah. And that's
So-
why John Green does an amazing job of breaking down the law. He does a great law
Yeah,
class.
he
and
is.
He is
His
like,
4-hour law class just
Ugh.
touches the iceberg of what's going on in Massachusetts.
But he is an encyclopedia. That man's
Yeah.
recallability is something I am eternally jealous
yeah,
of.
what is it? 131, 139, capital E, lowercase f, I don't know, whatever it may be.
He'll tell you what color the governor's shirt was the day he signed it. Like, it's
Oh, yeah.
wild. It was raining that day. Jim was standing to his left. Bob was standing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having,
Of course, thanks for having me.
for
This was
coming
fun.
on the show. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, concerns, or have any ideas for another topic for another show, please email us at sistersinarms2022@gmail.com. Until then, stay safe.
And stay vigilant.
That's it.
Oh.
Yep.
Train,
Cup
train,
of
train.
freedom. Cup of freedom.